Hello, welcome to the Dailies on Network Television, where we keep you updated with the happenings, looking at events that have happened through the weekend, and then we see some of the stories on the front page of our paper. So please do well to drop your own views and your concern regarding any of the story that is quite of interest to you. I am Sarah Elisha Dashem. I'm doing the program alongside Rachel Tanzi. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
All right, we have quite a number of papers we would like to run through this morning, starting with the Nigerian News Direct newspaper.
The first story on the paper: NAF killed top bandit commanders in Zamfara. Fidelity Bank rewards 10 customers with 10 million naira in JAIM 6 promo draw. The big story on Nigerian News Direct: leadership tussle rocks PDP as two national secretaries resume today amid confusion. The writer says stakeholders brace for potential showdown of if crises persist. And Yawu Udeokoye defy party leadership threatening chaos. You can find details on page 21. NDLEA intercepts Australia-bound cocaine hidden in face cream bottles in Lagos. On tax reform: promote president's achievements if any, don't attack me. Bauchi governor replies presidency. You can find details on page 2. Ogun State raises alarm on invasion of bandits, convenes security meeting. Details can be found on page 23, and that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
On the Vanguard newspaper, Emirship tussle, Bayero heads to Supreme Court. We will recall what happened last year regarding that. Do well to read more detail of that on page 13. Christian elders cheat Tinubu for attending Arab Islamic Summit. You can find that on page 8. Syria drags federal government governors to ECOWAS court over misuse of Cyber Crimes Act. You can find that story on page 10. OPEC quota eludes Nigeria amid rising oil output with the rider. Why oil output rises coming from local berry. And then we have pipeline vandalism, tech orders hinder the output. Most oil spill caused by oil theft and sabotage coming from Shell. NNPC Security Agency uncovers 33 illegal oil connections. Investors go for new oil gas asset. We have introduced critical regulation coming from the NUPRC. All these can be found on page 19. And we have the picture story showing Tinubu arriving at the United Arab Emirates. You can do well to read more detail of the story in the paper. Concerning the PDP crisis, fear grips Secretariat staff as activities resume. Obey court judgment affirming Okoye as PDP scribe. Board of Trustee Chairman Wabara tells the National Working Committee. Ucheli Government College 80th anniversary, Channels TV, Chiffon, Shell, buses, others back awards. You can read that on page 8. Repentant bandits seek forgiveness over atrocities. You can read detail of that on page 19. And as well, we have on sport, NFF begs Nigerians to support him, talking about the new Super Eagles coach. You can read that on page 37, and that's all on Vanguard newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, the big story is on road to $1 trillion economy. Nigeria stalls EU's path, integrate $146 billion shadow economy in GDP plan. You can find details on page 6. However, we also have an infographic here showing the underground economy, known as shadow economy, informal economy, or the black market. And then the illegal transactions: we have smuggling, human trafficking, gambling, and prostitution. The result is often a wrong GDP estimation. The challenge here is if Nigeria is going to include the shadow economy in the GDP plan, then we're looking at smuggling, human trafficking, gambling, and prostitution. Then you just can't help but wonder what will be the future of such businesses. The most challenging one, which most of the times people are victim of it, is human trafficking, and also that of prostitution, because we have them as public sex workers, as they're being taxed or called, and you can't help but wonder now, how will the tax go for such things? How do you get the demograph or the group of people who are employed under such, and will people come out and say this is my means of earning, and all of that, if we're including this into our GDP plan? And for smuggling and then gambling, there are sanctions. So we can see already things like this, when busted, we can say some funds could be recovered, missing money could be traced, and all of that, eventually some money recovered and all of that. But I think this is a tricky route, but as time goes on, we will see how this is a 2030 1 trillion naira economy. That is the plan, and we are in the year 2025, so we have 5 years to go to see that we are able to achieve a $1 trillion economy. You can find details on page 6. Bayero heads to Supreme Court over Emirship tussle. States honor fallen heroes, harp on peace and security. You can find details on page 3. Obasanjo reveals how Jimmy Carter saved him from Abacha. Mixed reactions trail announcement of Owade as Alaafin-elect. Diaspora group endorses Sheyi Tinubu as next governor of Lagos State. An airstrike, Zamfara government, APC applaud NAF as military denies civilian casualties. 500,000 farmers displaced within 2 years, says Dawn. You can find details on page 8, and that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper.
In as much as I wanted to turn a blind eye to this story, I just can't help but wonder what is the criteria that the diaspora group are endorsing Sheyi Tinubu as the next governor for Lagos State. It really won't be fair for other people, Lagosians, because we have other people who are competent, and his father was a one-time governor of that state, so it's not a family business. And I hope that people get all of these facts straight, because things like this can actually trigger something that we did not plan for. So I really do not know who are those diaspora groups that came up to endorse Sheyi Tinubu. Already we saw where people actually last year, when he came out and telling Nigerians to please understand with the situation, and people actually, backlash him and telling him to just go sit down. If you're enjoying luxury because your father is a president, you have no idea what Nigerians are going through. So I hope that we really don't know what is the criteria that they use to endorse him, but I hope that we stop this whole thing of nepotism and making it look like politics and bills. Things of governance has to do with the family business. We have other Lagosians that are capable, and they have what it takes to actually run that state. But then we'll keep our fingers crossed. I think this is up to our viewers to drop their own comments regarding that story.
And just as you said, Stella, is up to what criteria are they using. Is he competent? Is he good enough? Because in as much as we would like to say we don't want the whole family business thing, I've seen where politics is a family business for some people and they were competent. So regardless of being a family thing, they kept on delivering, and therefore the people allow them, because son, father, grandson, uncle, and all of that proves to be competent in whatever position. Sometimes it don't have to be governorship position. It could be in the Senate. It could be at the state level. It could be the House of Representatives. But I know over there, there are people that have proven to say, you know what, my family, we are politicians and we are good at doing it. So yes, it's not a family business, and it's not welcome. What is this endorsement based on? So more than just endorsing him, it's important that this group comes out and are they speaking the mind of every diaspora Nigerian or for every Lagosian. If not, then just as you said, it looks like a recipe for disaster, because then there's going to be a lot of tension that shouldn't be there. And I know that everybody is gearing up for 2027, and we're in 2025, and it's 2 years away, and time flies. And I know that so many on the groundwork is happening, and this one should be a careful one, because it could go extremely well and extremely bad at the end of the day.
Very true, very true. Well, let's take a look at another paper, which is the first news, where we have how Qatar fought for my release from Abacha's Gula coming from Obasanjo, and it seems as if Abacha was actually out of Obasanjo. We saw last year when he was talking about Gowon helping him, and now we see him talking about Qatar. So it seems as if Abacha was really out for Obasanjo's head. You can Do not read that story and without on a lighter note. Still on first news, we have Governor Aida Tiwa pardons 40 inmates to mark 60th birthday. Oyebanji commends military for crushing insurgents and bandits. You can read detail in the paper. And then we're looking at Syrup Sue Tinubu governors over alleged misuse of cyber crimes law. You can read that in the paper. Boko Haram Chibok attack leaves 2 dead village rust. And then the big story is regarding Zamfara horror. Airstrike meant for bandits kills 16 community defenders with the rider. NAF denies civilian casualties, cites verified intelligence. And Rachel, we remember we had this case in Kaduna last year, and still coming from the Nigerian Air Force, where they actually, according to the report where we saw even the House of Rep donating some of their allowances to the people of that community, and then here we're having that they verified, and we always have issues like these whereby civilians have to pay for it, and then later on we'll see the efforts coming out to deny that no civilian was injured, and then civilians will come out to say actually these are the number of people, and then sometimes you just can't help but wonder, so who is lying here, who actually is not getting their facts straight regarding this. But this is a horror that we've seen happening not once, not twice, and I believe this is not going to be the last either. But I'm hoping that when we talk about intelligence, we get this fact straight. It's very important. We're dealing with people's lives here. And I believe that the Nigerian Air Force have all the intelligence that is needed to verify an information before taking out any airstrike. But here we're seeing they're saying they verified, and then we're seeing 16 community defenders actually died eventually. So where I think it's too early for me to give my vote or to give my own input regarding this, but I'm hoping that we get this information straight eventually, where we don't have both people coming out, either the Nigerian Air Force or the community coming out to actually see a different story.
So until Nigeria becomes truly clear and transparent to a certain degree, before we would be able to know who is telling the truth. Now, if the NAF are coming to say that, you know what, there were no civilians involved, we strictly went after terrorists and we were successful. Now, who are the people coming out to say that civilians were involved? And who are these community defenders? Okay? Who are these community defenders? We do know that bandits, terrorists, have their hideout different from the community. Now, the question is your community keeping these terrorists? If you are hiding them, if you are becoming a hideout for bandits or terrorists, then there will be civilians casualties. However, it's at the detriment of you hiding these terrorists and keeping them. Because whether you like it or not, we have the military, be it the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy out there, and their aim is to fight terrorists and bandits. If you're standing in the way, there have to be casualties, or what we could call collateral damage, which either way is not good. But this is one. Are these communities shielding or hiding these bandits? Because it's supposed to be that bandits have their hideout, have wherever they stay separate from a community. Secondly, we can come and say, who are these community defenders that the Nigerian Air Force will mistaken 16 of them for terrorists? This, we're not talking about one or two. We can say it's a mistake. Who are these community defenders that 16 of them would die as a result of miscommunication of are these terrorists or not? And secondly, when there are victims of an attack or an event that happened that led to the loss of lives, usually these people's face should be known. These are the victims, to clear their name. Okay, Rachel Tanze is a teacher in so community, and when the Nigerian Air Force came and conducted a strike or an attack to flush out, she was affected by it. Who are these individuals? Are they faceless? There are families and all of that. Till we get to the point where we can put out these innocent victims and say Yahaya this, and say Umar this, and say Joseph that, and say Abraham this, were victims, were innocent victims, the community defenders. This is their background. They have no relationship whatsoever with terrorists and all of that. Then before we can say, okay, truly, these were civilians, but we don't have this information. Either these communities have something to lack, or as we would always say, keeps proving the incompetence of our military, that certain attacks keep happening and it's almost like they are not on top of it. But until we get to that point, I think it gives it a difficult position for you and I, Sele, here, looking at this information, and even for Nigerians out there, what is truly happening regarding security in this country. Do we have truly 16 innocent people in a community being killed, or are these terrorists hiding in communities, and these communities are paying for being a hideout for bandits and terrorists and all of that? These are all questions that needs answers, and I know that these communities have the answers. The Air Force have these answers until we have them willing to give us this information accurately and good enough for Nigerians to have their answers and say, okay, you know what, this is the problem out there. We will keep asking these many questions.
Let's just wait and hope that we'll get the answers to these questions eventually. Still on first newspaper, looking at tragic end, Benue businessman killed by herdsmen despite 5.5 million naira ransom payment. You can find that sad story in the paper. NDLEA arrests Shrine Chief Priest, seizes 2.7 tons of shirk. You can read that in the paper. Kanu Emirship dispute, Bayero heads to Supreme Court. The picture story, we are still having a president being received by Sheikh, the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs in Dubai, and that's all on the first newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, why Nigeria needs a focused leadership, a statement from Adum. The first story on the paper, Soludo is Sun's 2024 Man of the Year. 2025 budget, National Assembly comments commission over performance promises release of 220 billion naira capital project. Over 7,000 supporters back Adamawa APC, dumps Binani. How INEC chair gets National Assembly buy-in for 86 naira budget increment. Now, we do not see whether it's a million or billion, but we are seeing it just showed 86 naira budget increment. Experts attribute weak economy to reform fatigue. NGX Group champions Africa's financial future as ESX launches. And then we have a picture story where we can still see President Bola Tinubu arrives Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, received by His Excellency Sheikh Bud Nayan Al Nayan, cabinet member and Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs UAE. And that's all the news on the Daily Times newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, PDP fractional secretariat set for showdown, vow to resume today. NAF unveils tough rules to curb airmen's exodus. You can do well to read detail of that on page 41. How Carter intervened to save me from Abacha's gulag. This is coming from Obasanjo. Again, 16 civilians killed as NAF bombs Zamfara bandits. Detailed on page 8. Syria outages, Dangote NNPCL total 247 firms dumb discos generate 6,500 megawatts. The writer here say operators blame poor supply for move. And then we have federal government laments exit from national grid. More data found on page 31. I mean, what do you expect when people cannot rely on discos anymore? So they have to look for an alternative and not of that. So you can read detail of that on page 31. California fire, Trump blames leaders for poor response at 16 kills. You can find the international story on page 2. APC opposition differ on INEC 125 billion naira budget request. You can read that on page 40. On the Stampede, Oyo files murder charges against Oni, ex-queen and others, detailed on page 19. Ogun housewife stabs husband to death for alleged infidelity. You can find that on page 4. 80th anniversary GCU to honor Channels TV, Shell, Chevron Bosses, and others. You can find our story on page 41. We have the picture story. The president received in audience of the chairman of the First Bank Holdings, Femi Otidola, during the Otidola's courtesy visit to the president. This happened yesterday, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, home builders groan under challenge of inadequate artisans and craftsmen. 5 years after Nigerian vehicle financing scheme may commence this month, the writer says newly adopted national automotive policy enters second year. CBN rules diaspora investment with launch of 2 new products. NLC seeks dialogue on tax reform bills. Confucian Lamentation Trail Lagos ban on single-use plastics. You can find details on page 3. NDLEA seizes 6 vehicles. 40-feet trailer loads skunk in Abuja midnight raid. The big story on the paper, federal government probes rise in religious tension in the southwest. The writer says operatives question Sharia proponents in Oyo, arrest traditional worshippers for desecrating Quran. We have fashion-led OPC wants southwest governors to declare state of emergency on security. You can find details on page 22. On Ibadan Stampede, court determines bail application today. Suspects may face fresh 18-count charge. Soldiers kill over 25 terrorists, destroy 2G's camp in Zamfara. After 2019 Supreme Court verdict, Eruwa to begin selection process of new Oba. Anxiety as 2 national secretaries resume today. This is in PDP. Opposing supporters spoil for war. More details can be found on page 3, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Metric newspaper, Nigeria secures $7.6 billion investment pledges at AIF 2024 African Development Bank. You can start on the front page and continue on page 3. 10-men Barcelona trash Real Madrid 5-2 to win Spanish Super Cup. You can read that for sport lovers on page 22. How Jimmy Carter visited Abacha to seek my release from prison, coming from Obasanjo. Say we shall meet again in paradise. Detail found on page 3. 16 kidnapped as bandits attack Kaduna Church. I hope that they have not resumed again with the attacks of religious centers. We hope that the government should be up and about to check and verify all of these and make sure that everybody is safe even when they go to worship in their own respective place of worship. Detail found on page 9. The big story concerning Zamfara military airstrike. Uproar trace death of civilians. The writer here saying Zamfara counters NAF confirmed death of civilians. And then we have the Nigerian Air Force launches probe pledges to minimize harm to civilians in the course of operations. Says the whereabouts of Tunji unknown. Several top commanders killed. You can find more detail of this story in the paper. Ex-presidential candidate labels Tinubu's economy team as slow, not proactive. Ojikalu facilitates Senator Mbata new Ohanize Indibo precedent. And regarding Kanu emirship, Tosu Bayaro heads to Supreme Court. And then we have an entertainment story on page 23. Do well to get a paper in more detail of these and others.
On Daily Nation newspaper, Rise Defend Democracy Constitution, says ECL. The big story, UN sanctions Zambia for rights violations due to widespread human rights abuses, wanton arrest of opposition members. The country has been removed from the list of those to hold office at the Human Rights Council, comprising 47 member states elected by the UN General Assembly. Fully angry over Mumbi's arrest, HH has not rejected Pope's offer on Zambia's debt cancellation. For more details on Zambian stories, get the Daily Nation newspaper, and that's all the news on the paper.
Alright, let's take a look at another Nigerian paper, which is the Voice of Liberty, where we have Sheyi Tinubu can become next Lagos governor, coming from youth minister. You can read detail in the paper. 3 months after redeployment order, Tinubu CSO refused to budge, remains in office. On insecurity, northern governors lack the willpower to fight banditry, coming from retired general. And you wonder why they are saying that, because it seems as if terrorism is actually thriving more in the north. So here we're seeing retired general saying that the northern governors lack the willpower. As we always say, if there is a will, there would definitely be a way to fight it. Do well to read more detail of that in the paper. Auditor General report implicates NNPCL in 2.68 trillion naira, $9.77 million fund diversion. A report by the Auditor General of the Federation has implicated the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited of funds misappropriation revenue diversion of 2.68 trillion naira, $9.77 million over a 4-year period. So we look forward to seeing a probe regarding this allegation. Tinubu bans homosexuality, cross-dressing in military. ABU to honor Okonjo-Iweala, Sheikh El Hassan with honorary degrees. You can do well to read that in the paper. Address high cost of governance at the expense of masses. Christian leaders beg the federal government. And then still on the paper making rounds on most, still talking about the tussle regarding the emirship in Kano. Do well to grab the paper and read these and many others, and that's all on the Voice of Leadership.
On Blueprint newspaper, Benue community buries victim of Christmas Day attack. On business, inflation may close year 2024 higher at 35.3%, a report from Rwani. NFA unveils Super Eagles coach today. The big story on the paper: air-ground assault devastates Turji's stronghold, kills cause. The writer says camps dismantled in Zamfara. Lawal APC lose troops commensurate with civilian casualties. Kebbi immigration border facilities attacked. 3 contractors, 1 other killed. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 6. Kano emirship tussle, Bayero rejects verdict, heads for Supreme Court. Jimmy Carter saved me from Abacha's gulag. A statement from Obasanjo says he was one of my foreign friends who stood by me. More details can be found on page 8. Tax reform bills, there's need for federal government and labor dialogue. First Bank Nigerian Holdings shares rise, and we have federal government 21 states eye 2.5 trillion naira VAT revenue. And that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
Alright, before we continue further looking at the paper review, let's take a time out and let you go through the stories, drop your comment, and when we come back, we will continue with the paper analysis. Please stay tuned with us. Thanks for staying tuned. It's still the dailies. Before we went on break, we're looking at some of the stories that make it round on our paper. One is that, well, Obasanjo is actually sending his own tribute regarding what Jimmy Carter did for him during the Abacha's regime by saving his life. As well as we're seeing that, unfortunately, we're having where civilians got affected by the airstrike by the Nigerian efforts, even though we're saying that the Nigerian efforts are saying civilians were not affected, but then the community are coming out to say something totally different. So fingers all crossed. Let's see what's going to come out of the story, and we hope that we get all this information right. I'm still Stella. I still have with me Rachel Tanzi. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Welcome, Stella.
All right, the next paper we will be looking at is the Leadership newspaper. Troops neutralize 25 terrorists, destroy Bello Tunji's camp. You can read that on page 25. Jimmy Carter saved me from Abacha's gulag, coming from Obasanjo. Fact check, why is APC's Muka receiving death threats? You can find that on page 2. And then on numbers, we have U.S. government returns the Zenith looted $52.88 million to Nigeria. So you can read that as well, still on page 2. Rent default cases rise over hardship and cost of living. You can read that in the paper. And on tax bill, show Nigerians consultation report, Bauchi governor tells presidency. 5 governors may dump parties ahead of 2027. The writers say PDP cheating over Mba, Oborowori, Eno, and Fubara. OT in the spotlight as LP crisis lingers. They won't dump platforms for APC coming from the 8th. Well, we'll cross our fingers and see where these governors will be going. Look forward to that question as well as the answer on page 4. Water scarcity hits Mina. Vandals are being blamed, and I think something needs to be done about this. People are stealing pipes left, right, center. You can read that story on page 20. And we have IDP camp will soon be destroyed in Benue, coming from Ali. You can find that story on page 16. FCT communities hails Wiki over road construction. You can read that on page 20. And that's all on the Leadership newspaper.
On National Economy newspaper, the big story there, from 34% to 15% target, what federal government must do to tackle inflation in 2025. You can continue with this story on page 4. We have Governor Umar, others get leadership awards. You can find details on page 5. And with the start of the week, we have what the US dollar is buying and selling. We have pound sterling, we have euros, and this is the exchange rate from the Central Bank of Nigeria. We have Brent, that's the crude oil grade, at $76.250, and we have gold at $2,668, silver at $30, and gas at $3.5. And the last story here, Nigerian banks face transformative 2025 with recapitalization push. Details on page 15, and that's all the news on national economy.
On Business Day newspaper, CBN loans to banks hit 5-year high on liquidity squeeze. Jimmy Carter sought my release from prison under Abacha, coming from Obasanjo. And we have banks FRS in tango over windfall tax. The last story on the paper, Nigeria secured $7.6 billion investment pledge at African Forum. You can turn to page 4 for that story, and that's all on Business Day newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, the big story is NFF unveils Malian as new Eagles coach today. So that's a big welcome. Ex-Mali coach assistants to take charge of Chan Eagles. You can find details on page 7. Nigerians abroad, Okerike's cause again in Gaziantep win. Joshua wants Fury fight this year. 10-man Devils knocks Ghana out of FA Cup. Osaze, my Olympic golf dream. Monday releases and tennis brief brace. And we have Dortmund, Napoli, Milan in Rashford race. Barca target Isaac. Arteta sets target for Saka ahead return. We have Arena's kids shine in Portuguese table tennis tourney. Nigeria face Pakistan in Under 19 Cricket World Cup friendly. Sabalanka starts Australian Open defense with win. You can find details on page 2 in that all the news on Point Sports Extra.
Right, let's take a look at the Nation newspaper where we don't own First Bank $225 million says General Hydrocarbons. You can find that on page 4. We saw that story starting last week. INEC plan diaspora inmate voting. 2023 polls revealed. You can turn to page 2 for that story. NDIDA intercept Australia-born drug dealer with a rider 1.1 billion naira cocaine seized in Rivers. You can find that on page 6. Nigeria partners Ethiopian First Securities Exchange, and on Stampy Oyo slam 18-count charge on Naomi and others. More detail found on page 18 and on page 5. The big story: federal government ministerial panel to enforce council autonomy, where we have AGF to begin direct disbursement. Committee begins 2-day meeting, Edu to brief the president. And we have recapitalization, bank mergers, acquisition looms. You can read that story on the front page and continue on page 4. ASWAP saying no cause for alarm, says the Southwest states. Government strengthening grassroots intelligence, reinvigorated. You can find that. I take that again. Government strengthening grassroots intelligence, reinvigorate Amoteku. You can find that on page 4. Lawmakers seek special status for Lagos, and then troops kill 25 terrorists in Zamfara. We have two picture stories. One is the president with Odetola, and then the other is the governor of Borno State. You can do well to read more detail of the stories and more, and that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On this, Nigeria pensioners raise concerns on discrepancies in payments of 20% arrears increase. The big story is on looted funds. Nigerians deserve full disclosure. Lawyers, CSOs want government to render account of status of Abacha and others recovered funds. Outrage over Dezeni's loot as U.S. directs on how $52.88 million should be utilized. Troops kill 25 terrorists in Zamfara, rescue 7 kidnapped victims. Neuropsychiatrist blames rising rate of depression, suicide on social media. You can find details on page 7. At the same time, if social media is beginning to make you depressed, it's time you take a break and give yourself a social media detox. But it's difficult. At the same, we can help each other sell and say, you know what, we need a break from social media because there's a lot of fake life that is making young people think that, you know what, these people are my age, they are making it, and why am I there? So all of a sudden, you're having this feeling that your life is difficult and you are where you're not supposed to be, or when will you ever get there? So these issues are legit because there are studies about it. It's not something that you would tag someone as stupid or foolish for thinking that way, but how do we help one another that we do not get to the point of depression and suicide based on somebody's fake life or social media. Still on this, Nigeria, alleged misuse of Cybercrimes Act, Serap drags federal government, governors to ECOWAS court. And that's all the news on this, Nigeria.
To round up the show, let's take a look at New Telegraph newspaper 2025 budget. EFCC and others to spend 4.86 billion naira on bank charges and insurance. You can start on the front page and continue on page 3. And on growth, capital market poses recorded 12.17 trillion naira listing in 2024. Qatar pushed for my freedom from Abacha's detention, coming from Obasanjo. Kalu rallies support for Tinubu's reform as Jumbo joins APC. And we have insecurity, declared state of emergency. OPC urges the Southwest governors. Work for peace, unity of Nigeria, Obi tells Ohanaeze Esco. You can find out on page 3. And on page the big story here, we have mass withdrawals hit private schools over 50% tuition fee hike. Many parents search for cheaper alternatives, and you can find that on page 3. As well, we have federal government votes 759.3 billion naira for Eleshe Jos Gombe Umahi prison. So you can read more detail of that story on page 26. LIRS set January 31st deadline for annual tax return filing. Alleged misuse of Cybercrime Act, Sarah takes Tinubu and others to ECOWAS court. And then we have, coming from Zamfara, troops dismantle Tunji's enclave, kill over 25 bandits, rescue 7 kidnapped victims as gunmen abduct 3 soldiers, 32 others in Enugu. Terrorists attack Kebbi immigration border facilities, kill 4. Headers have been killing us like chickens for 12 years. You can read that on page 2, 3, 4, 26, and 31. And on food stampede, partner churches to help the poor citizens. We have Kigama tells federal government says no one should die of hunger, needless death. So you can read that on page 2. We have a study that links red light exposure to lower blood clot risks. So I think this is a very important study that everyone should look up to on page 26. And that is all a new telegraph as well as how far we can go the program this morning. Thank you so much for always tuning in, as well as thank you for dropping your comments and contributing to the program. So look forward again to doing this together tomorrow. Please do have a lovely day ahead.